Welcome to J is for Justice podcast. If live breaking news and following true crime is your thing, then please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you like what you see in my videos, please consider giving them a thumbs up. Happy Saturday! Thank you for joining me on a Saturday stream. It kind of sounded like the Pink Panther. Hey, Mike Sanner, we missed you yesterday. I think it was yesterday you weren't here. Hope you're doing well and having a great weekend. Thank you, Robin. Robin is our newest moderator. Let's give Robin a big round of Roberta applause. I would be lying to you folks if I said I wasn't fighting off a headache for half the day today. So thanks for being here. We're going to be talking about Ted Kaczynski, the UNABOMBER, not with an I, but with an A. You were quiet. Oh, that's unusual, Mike. Should we be concerned? So I have to correct myself first. He didn't die in the ADX. He did not die there. He was transferred in 2021. I found this out when I was researching for tonight, that Ted Kaczynski was transferred to Virginia, and we'll get into that. And that's where like inmates that are ill go to. But there was another death in the ADX, and that was the man on the screen, who's Robert Philip HANSSEN. Robert Philip HANSSEN. And we're going to talk about both of those. Unyo CEO.
Pawpaw. Roro causing Pawpaw. I mean,
Who was Roro?
Moderators are entitled to sick days, of course. I hope you are feeling better and feeling okay. But yeah, we're going to talk about him, and we're also going to talk about Kaczynski. What's up, Allison? I am going to open up the Q&A for you guys because I want to know your thoughts and feedback while we go through this. And then at the end of the stream, we will go through those per usual. So let me get that going. Ask away. And you can go to the top and you want to put it on live chat, but you can switch it around, I think is how it works. And then I'm also going to put up a new poll regarding Mr. Kaczynski. Did you know that, I'm just going to put TK went to Harvard? That's your quiz question. There you go. Okay. Hold on. Let me get my my bearings to me, because I'm going to read this to you guys. And I'm not going to be looking at chat. That's why I put the thingamajig up there. Because I want you guys to be able to ask your questions. And I want to be able to focus on what we're talking about. Because this is important to me. This is one of those cases that I find to be very important. This is the kind of shit we're going to be covering on Given the Fallout. So this is the kind of stuff we're going to be digging into. The stuff you didn't learn about in school.
Given the Fallout. Given the Fallout.
What's Given the Fallout, you say? Given the Fallout is Potato and I's new podcast that is coming at the end of this month. We've only got a few short weeks, guys. And our first episode is going to be on J. Edgar Hoover and all of his creepiness and scandals and everything about that. So you're going to get a little piece of the kind of stuff we're going to be digging into, because a lot of people don't know the mainstream, or they know the mainstream story. They don't know the background, because if you didn't care, or your age or whatever the case may be, this happened a long time ago. There's a lot of people who were younger then who didn't care about this stuff. And I'm one of those. I didn't really pay attention back then. Not that I didn't really care, but I had 3 little kids. So now that I have more time and I can go back and relearn what I didn't learn and, pick up any kind of breadcrumbs that have been left along the way since these people are dying. Because like with JFK, right? We got all these records because no one's alive anymore. They're all dead. So, yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. So let me fix my thing here, because we're not watching Brian Koberger right now. I need to update that. And if you see me squinting, it's because I need new glasses really bad. Like, all of a sudden, I'm blind as a bat. All right. Hey, Emily. Good to see you. So, speaking of given the fallout.
It's very white-sided.
It's not white-sided. Given the fallout.
Given the fallout.
We're trying to get Potato a mic that's decent so that our recordings don't sound like she's on Mars. So she has an Amazon wish list that I put up in the chat. It's separate from mine because it goes straight to her house in England. Because for me to get it and then ship it to her, it's like $50 just to ship one small little box. So if you'd like to help out the patata,
given the fallout from
the link just went by in chat. That's what made me think of it. All right, so let's get going, shall we? Let's talk about the Unabomber. And here is just another photo to get up on the screen while we talk. All right. So we're going to start from the beginning. We're going to start with Ted Kaczynski's beginning. He was a very smart young man. He went on to Harvard at 16 years old. That's how smart he was. During his sophomore year at Harvard in 1959, he was recruited for a psychological experiment that at the time he didn't know would last 3 years. This experiment involved psychological torment and humiliation. And a lot of these excerpts that I'm going to be reading come from the book Mind Wars, Brain Research and the Military in the 21st Century. And that is by Jonathan D. Marino, Ph.D. So a lot of these quotes are going to be from that book, just to let you guys know. The Harvard study aimed at psychic deconstruction by humiliating undergraduates and therefore causing them to experience severe stress. Kaczynski's anti-technological fixation and his critical self had some roots in the Harvard curriculum, which emphasized the supposed objectivity of science compared with the subjectivity of ethics. Before his arrest, he demanded that the Washington Post and the New York Times publish a 35,000-word manifesto, and he called that manifesto The Industrial Society and Its Future. And it expressed all of Ted's views of science, culture, and what technology is going to bring us in the future. And he believed that the Industrial Revolution was like human enslavement. Like we were going to be slaves to technology. And this is a quote from Ted. He said, "The system does not and cannot exist to satisfy human needs. Instead, it is human behavior that has to be modified to fit the needs of the system. The only way out is to destroy the fruits of industrialization and promote the return of wild nature, in spite of the potentially negative consequences of doing so." After Harvard, Kaczynski earned his PhD in mathematics from the University of Michigan. I had no idea he went to U of M. Crazy. I'm from Michigan. Weird, right, Robin? Oh, man. Okay, so then he taught briefly at the University of California, Berkeley. After that was when he dropped out of society. For 18 years, he made homemade bombs and terrorized those he viewed as agents of anti-human technology. Can you imagine what he thought of Elon Musk? I wish someone would have interviewed this man before he died. People with brains like his who went through that era, we won't get them back. Like, we just won't get them back. And it's sad. For that, it's very sad. And to be honest with you, I find Ted Kaczynski's life traumatic. I think it's awful. I think it's unfortunate. So anyways, after going off the grid, he moved into a Montana cabin in 1996. Or when he was arrested in 1996, he was in a remote Montana cabin. The man who conducted the humiliation experiment was the brilliant and complex Harvard psychologist, Henry Murray. Henry Murray was one of the most important scientists of his day, the pioneer of personality tests that are now a routine part of industrial management and psychological assessments. It is not too much to say that contemporary psychology would be far different without his contributions. So then this guy who wrote this book, he has in this article, he has a full disclosure. Murray was a close friend and colleague of his father's, but he says they knew nothing of this experiment. So this dude who wrote this book, his dad and him were friends with Henry Murray. Henry Murray was a native of New York who became a Boston Brahmin. He attended the finest schools, Groton and Harvard, and earned an MD from Columbia and a doctorate in biochemistry from Cambridge University. He dropped medicine and natural science for psychology after reading Carl Jung, publishing a landmark work in 1938 called Explorations in Personality. Before World War II, this is where it gets interesting, the U.S. government asked him to do a psychological profile of Hitler. And during the war, he helped the Office of Strategic Services, later to become the CIA. So before it was the CIA, it was the Office of Strategic Services to assess its agents. In the 1950s, Murray's personality test, it's now called the TAT, was used to screen Harvard students. What? What? Can you believe this crap?
What?
They knew the smartest of the smart was coming into Harvard. So here we go. And yet another odd twist that shows why history is stranger than fiction. While Kaczynski was undergoing those humiliation experiments, a young Harvard researcher named Timothy Leary was beginning his research career on psychedelics. In 1960, Leary returned from a vacation in Mexico with a suitcase full of magic mushrooms. Murray himself is said to have supervised psychoactive drug experiments, including Leary's. According to Alston Chase, author of Harvard and the Unabomber, Leary called Murray, quote, the wizard of personality assessment, who, as OSS chief psychologist, had monitored military experiments on brainwashing and sodium amytal interrogation. I need some Twilight Zone music now. Oh my God. What? Oh, shoot. So that is our first little excerpt on, the background of Theodore. Let me come to chat and see what you guys are thinking so far, because I just, did these parents who were sending their children to Harvard, were they knowing this? This was the reason for these tests? It was probably, just, basic tests. Oh, I forgot my background music. It was probably just basic tests to, get entry into Harvard, which is absolutely nuts. Would have been probably nice to know that, right? So we're going to find out more about those experiments. Let me pull my document up. Hold on. I really need new glasses. Holy heck. You know, I just feel like if people knew like the truth about some of these things, or the background, I guess, maybe not even the truth, because I mean, we know he did what he did, but maybe if people knew the background of these situations, there wouldn't, you know, really be so much hate, I guess. You know, we were told that this guy was just a deranged lunatic. And as he may have been at that time, what was he before that? He was very smart, right? Look at this photo of him. This is what he looked like before the Harvard experiment. That was him as a young man. Now, if you want my honest opinion, we got 64 people here watching. If I had Idaho 4, there'd be like 400 people here. This is why people don't know these things. This is why the majority of people don't know these things. Perfect example right there. All right, let's move on. Let's learn more about the experiments that were done on him. And I'm wondering, who are the other students and where are they? Are any of those other students perhaps, have they done bad stuff, or did they turn out normal? I mean, I just think that there should be some follow-up on this, maybe. Okay, here we go. And this is coming from The Guardian, okay? In 1958, a brilliant but socially inept 15-year-old began his studies at Harvard. Like many of his peers, he volunteered for a number of personality tests in return for a small fee. So that's how this was done. Only these were no ordinary tests, and the student was Ted Kaczynski, now better known as the Unibomber. This guy wrote, he was a Harvard student at the same time. So this guy wrote with Ted Kaczynski, and he started corresponding with him in the late 90s, and I think it was 1998. And that was when he first heard of the Murray experiment, and that's what Ted himself called it. So Ted had begun corresponding with this reporter in July of this author in 1998. And it was a few months after the federal court in Sacramento, California, sentenced him to life without the possibility of parole. He hinted darkly that the Murray Center seemed to feel it had something to hide. One of his defense investigators, he said, reported that the center had told participating psychologists not to talk with his defense team. Through research at the Murray Center and the Harvard archives, this man found that among its other purposes, Henry Murray's experiment was intended to measure how people react under stress. Murray subjected his unwitting students, including Kaczynski, to intensive interrogation, what Murray himself called vehement, sweeping, and personally abusive attacks, assaulting his subjects' egos and most cherished ideals and beliefs. My quest was specific, to determine what effects, if any, the experiment may have had on Kaczynski. Kaczynski was accepted by Harvard in the spring of 1958. He was not yet 16 years old. One friend remembers urging Kaczynski's father, Turk, not to let the boy go, arguing he's too young, too immature, and Harvard is too impersonal. But Turk wouldn't listen. He said Ted's going to Harvard was an ego trip for him. Murray, a wealthy and blue-blooded New Yorker, was a scientist and a humanist. Before the war, he had been the director of the Harvard Psychological Clinic. And then we went over, he was the forerunner of the Office of Strategic Services, which became the CIA. And he was doing these testings and monitoring military experiments on brainwashing. After the war, Murray returned to Harvard, where he continued to refine techniques of personality assessment. By 1950, he had resumed studies on Harvard undergrads. Before the war, he had started those, and it was called Multiform Assessments of Personality Development Among Gifted College Men. Why would they need to do this, you guys? The experiment in which Kaczynski participated was the last and most elaborate of these. In their post-war form, these experiments focused on stressful interpersonal relations, designing confrontations akin to those mock interrogations he had helped to orchestrate for the OSS. Kaczynski has said that he was pressured into participating. His hesitation turned out to be sensible. Researchers gave the volunteers almost no information about the experiment in which they would participate. Each was simply asked to answer yes to the following question. Would you be willing to contribute to the solution of certain psychological problems, part of an ongoing program of research in the development of personality, by serving as a subject in a series of experiments or taking a number of tests, average about 2 hours a week through the academic year at the current college rate per hour? That was the only question asked. In fact, it would never be clear what the certain psychological problems were, and the test that served as the centerpiece for the undertaking appears remarkably similar to the old OSS stress test. Students would be given the third degree, but whereas the OSS applicants must have known that enduring unpleasant interrogations would be part of their job, these students did not. The intent was to catch them by surprise, deceive them, and to brutalize them. The students were led to believe that they would debate their philosophy of life with another student like themselves. In fact, they were confronted by a well-prepared stooge, a lawyer. When the subject arrived, he was escorted to a brilliantly lighted room and seated in front of a one-way mirror. A motion picture camera recorded his every move and facial expression through a hole in the wall. This sounds like something out of the Twilight Zone. Is this real? Is this real? Electrodes leading to machines that recorded his heart and respiratory rates were attached to his body. Forrest Robinson, the author of a biography of Murray, has described what happened next. As instructed, the unwitting subject attempted to represent and defend his personal philosophy of life. Invariably, however, he was frustrated and finally brought to expressions of real anger by the withering assault of his older, more sophisticated opponent, while fluctuations in the subject's pulse and respiration were measured. Not surprisingly, most participants found this highly unpleasant, even traumatic. We were led into the room with very bright lights. Very bright. One of them, codenamed Kringle, recalled afterwards. I had a sensation somewhat akin to someone being strapped on the electric chair with these electrodes. I really started getting hit really hard. Wham, wham, wham. And me getting hotter and more irritated and my heartbeat going up and sweating terribly. Right away, said another, codenamed Trump. Can't make it up. Can't make it up. Describing his experience afterwards, said, I didn't like the interrogator. Dr. G came waltzing over and put on those electrodes, but in that process, while he was doing that, kind of whistling. And then Mr. R, who was bubbling over, dancing around, started to talk to me about he liked my suit. The buzzer would ring or something like that. We were supposed to begin. He was being sarcastic or pretty much of a wise guy. And the first thing that entered my mind was to get up and ask him outside immediately. But that was out of the question because the electrodes and the movie and all that. I kind of sat there and began to fume. And then he went on and he got my goat and I couldn't think of what to say. And then they came along and they took my electrodes off. Codenamed Trump, eh? During the last year of the experiment, Murray made the students available to his graduate student assistants to serve as guinea pigs for their own research projects. Wow. By graduation, as Kenneth Keniston, one of the researchers, summarized the process later, he said, quote, each student had approximately 200 hours in the research and had provided hundreds of pages of information about himself, his beliefs, his past life, his family, his college life, development, fantasies, and hopes and dreams. Why were the students willing to endure this ongoing stress and probing into their private lives? Some who had assisted Murray in the experiment confessed that they had wondered this themselves, but they can only speculate that some of the students, including Kaczynski, did it for the money. That some, again, probably including Kaczynski, had doubts about their own psychic health and were seeking reassurance about it. That some, suffering from Harvard's well-known anonymity, were lonely and needed someone to talk to, and that simply had an interest in helping advance scientific knowledge. But in truth, we don't know. A former research associate of Murray, who has long been bothered about the unethical dimension of this study, told this author, later, I thought, we took and used them, and what did we give them in return? What was the purpose of the experiment? Murray gave himself curiously equivocal answers. Sometimes he suggested that his research might not have no value at all. As the data stand, there are nothing but raw data, meaningless as such, and the question is what meaning, what intellectual news can be extracted from them. In another context, he asked, are the costs in man-made hours incurred by our elaborate multiple procedures far greater than any possible gains in knowledge? Sounds like this guy was a little loopy. Murray. It is clear that Murray's experiment deeply affected at least some of its subjects. Even 25 years later, some recalled the unpleasantness. In 1987, Kringle remembered the anger and embarrassment, the glass partition, the electrodes, and wires running up our sleeves. 25 years later, Drill, another guy named Drill, still had very vivid general memories of the experience. He said, I remember someone putting electrodes and blood pressure counter on my arm just before filming. I was startled by my interlocutor's venom. I remember responding with unabating rage. And then 25 years later, Locust wrote, I remember appearing one afternoon for a debate and being hooked up to electrodes and sat in a chair with bright lights and being told a movie was being made. I remember him attacking me, even insulting me for my values or for my opinions I just expressed in my written material. I remember being shocked by the severity of the attack. I remember feeling helpless to respond. What is the point of this? They have deceived me, telling me there was going to be a discussion when in fact there was an attack. We don't know what effect this experiment may have had on Kaczynski. No one has had access to his records. But he certainly could have been one of the most vulnerable of Murray's experimental subjects, a point that the researchers seem to have missed. He was among the youngest and the poorest of the group. He also may have come from a dysfunctional home. As his college life continued, outwardly, Kaczynski seemed to be adjusting to Harvard, but inwardly, he increasingly seethed. According to Sally Johnson, the forensic psychologist who examined Kaczynski, he began worrying about his health. He began having terrible nightmares. He started having fantasies about taking revenge against a society he increasingly viewed as an evil force, obsessed with imposing conformism through psychological controls. These thoughts upset Kaczynski all the more because they exposed his ineffectuality. Johnson reported that he would become horribly angry with himself because he could not express this openly. Quote, I never attempted to put any such fantasies into effect because I was too strongly conditioned against any defiance of authority. I could not have committed a crime of revenge, even a relatively minor crime, because my fear of being caught and punished was all out of proportion to the actual danger of getting caught, end quote. Kaczynski felt that justice demanded that he take revenge on society, but he lacked the personal resources to do so. He had always been a good boy. Instead, he would seek escape. he began to dream about breaking away from society and living a primitive life. According to Johnson, he began to study information about wild edible plants and to spend time learning about the wilderness. And like many American intellectuals before him, he began to form a plan to seek personal renewal in nature. Today's society would not tolerate the deceptions of the Murray experiments, but different standards prevailed then, and its ethics were definitely acceptable in their day, but the ethics were wrong. And they framed Kaczynski's first encounter with a reckless scientific value system that elevated the pursuit of scientific truth above human rights. When soon after Kaczynski began to worry about the possibility of mind control, he was not giving vent to paranoid delusions. In view of Murray's experiment, he was not only rational but right. The university and the psychiatric establishment that had been willing accomplices in an experiment that had treated human beings as guinea pigs and had treated them brutally. Here is a powerful logical foundation for Kaczynski's laterally expressed conviction that academics, in particular scientists, were thoroughly compromised servants of the system, employed in the development of techniques for the behavioral control of populations. It was the confluence of two streams of development that transformed Kaczynski into the Unabomber. One was personal, fed by his anger towards his family and those he felt had slighted or hurt him in high school and in college. The other derived from his philosophical critique of society and its institutions, and reflected the culture of despair he encountered at Harvard and later. The Murray experiment, containing both psychological and philosophical components, may well have fed both streams. I hope you enjoyed that article, because that I found absolutely fascinating and sad all at the same time. Because you know what? He deserved better. He deserved better. He was so smart. 15 years old, and his father shoos him off to Harvard in the hands of these men to just do these experiments on his boy. And yeah, craziness. I know, wouldn't that have been great to hear what he thought of Elon? What he thought of AI and all that. He was ahead of his time. His manifesto is super, super long, but I'm going to read you guys a couple quotes from him, from the manifesto, because they're pretty powerful. I know you might have to go back and replay him because he's so smart. Like, I have to really focus when I read some of his quotes because they are so intellectual. But this one here is about pharmaceutical drugs and depression, things like that. And he says, I quote, "Imagine a society that subjects people to conditions that make them terribly unhappy, then gives them the drugs to take away their unhappiness. Science fiction, it is already happening to some extent in our own society. Instead of removing the conditions that make people depressed, modern society gives them antidepressant drugs. In effect, antidepressants are a means of modifying an individual's internal state in such a way to enable him to tolerate social conditions that he would otherwise find intolerable." True. That one's very, very... I can't agree more with that. Craziness. All right, here's another one. "Those who are most sensitive about politically incorrect terminology are not the average black ghetto dweller, Asian immigrant, abused woman, or disabled person, but a minority of activists, many of whom who do not even belong to any oppressed group, but come from privileged strata of society." Is he not right? Who do you always hear talking about being politically correct? This dude was a genius, and they ruined him. And they put him in 23-1 for decades. For decades. Here's another one. History is made by active, determined minorities, not by the majority, which seldom has a clear and consistent idea of what it really wants. Let's see. I'm going to find one about technology. Here's one about mental health. The concept of, quote, mental health in our society is defined largely by the extent to which an individual behaves in accord with the needs of the system and does so without showing signs of stress. This is pretty long, but let's read this one. This one's about activism and leftists. He says, leftists may claim that their activism is motivated by compassion or by moral principles. And moral principle does play a role for the leftist of the over-socialized type. But compassion and moral principle cannot be the main motives for leftist activism. Hostility is too prominent a component of leftist behavior. So is the drive for power. Moreover, much leftist behavior is not rationally calculated to be of benefit to the people whom the leftists claim they are trying to help. For example, if one believes that affirmative action is good for black people, does it make sense to demand affirmative action in hostile or dogmatic terms? Obviously, it would be more productive to take a diplomatic approach that would make at least verbal and symbolic concessions to white people who think that affirmative action discriminates against them. But leftist activists do not take such an approach because it would not satisfy their emotional needs. Helping black people is not their real goal. Instead, race problems serve as an excuse for them to express their own hostility and frustrated need for power. In doing so, they actually harm black people because the activists' hostile attitude towards the white majority tends to intensify race hatred. That's something you have to really stop and think about and really listen to. And then finally, the last quote and I'll put all these links in the description of this video if you want to, replay it and do some research on your own and read some more. He was really a fascinating person. It's unfortunate, the victims that died due to his bombs. There was 3 victims, but it's also unfortunate what happened to him as a kid. You can't forget he was a kid. But here is the final quote I'm going to share with you guys. It says, "It would be better to dump the whole stinking system and take the consequences." I wonder what Elon Musk would say about that. Hey, Mandy. Hey, Jay Leo. Good to see you. Oh, gosh. I know. I don't even want to dive into 9/11. Oh, I know. I used to have like this whole different view on it, Jay. And I was like, oh, our government, back I would never do anything to hurt us. No. I can't get into that because I have like a friend of mine that passed away in one of the World Trade Towers. And that shit pisses me off because I guess I was very naive to it. But let's move into our next story. This is going to be the man who died in the ADX. So like I said, Ted did not. He died in a hospital in Virginia. He was moved there in late 2021. He was 81 years old when he passed away. And we don't know. We don't know any details on, if it was old age, if he was ill, if he had cancer. We're not sure. When are these from? So this was from his manifesto, the manifesto, which was published in 1996, I believe. It's called Industrial Society and Its Future, and it was published, 1995. First published January 1st of 1995. 35,000 word essay. Crazy, crazy town. He is a very smart individual. So let's talk about this dude. This is Robert HANSSEN. And Mr. Robert HANSSEN here, let's make this bigger. I'm going to cover myself up for a few. All right, so I'm going to pull up another picture of Robert HANSSEN. Hold on. Robert HANSSEN was not your typical FBI agent. So he was a G-man. Mr. HANSSEN was a G-man, and then shit went awry. And when I say it went awry pretty bad. So this is Robert HANSSEN. Happy Saturday, Miss Leo. All right, let's learn a little bit about Mr. Robert HANSSEN. So Mr. Robert HANSSEN was the son of a Chicago cop. Believe it or not. He was raised going to mass on Sundays. He occasionally shocked his colleagues at the FBI by spouting profanity-laced quotes from General George S. Patton. But to folks such as I.C. Smith, who was a one-time colleague in the FBI's counterintelligence division, Bob HANSSEN was not your typical FBI agent. Why do you say? What did Bob HANSSEN do? Bob HANSSEN was living two lives. So poor Bob HANSSEN's wife. He was charged with spying for 15 years on the U.S. government for the Russians. You heard me right, folks. There was a 100-page FBI affidavit that I'm going to put in our Patreon so you guys can look through it. I'll also put Ted Kaczynski's 35,000-page manifesto in there for you guys to look at in your free time. You can maybe read it when you're on the pot. Some good pot reading stuff. I don't know. Anyways, there's a 100-page affidavit filed in connection with these charges. And they interviewed this guy's neighbors, relatives, and they said that on the surface, this dude was a suburban dad. He was doing great at his government job, joining his wife Bonnie to raise their 6 children in the Washington suburbs, putting them through Catholic schools and colleges, making the payments on a Ford Taurus and a Isuzu Trooper and a fast-fading VW van, baby. At the same time, the government says HANSSEN was something else entirely. He was a spy for the Soviet Union. And its successor, the Russian Federation. They were sworn enemies of his team, the FBI counterintelligence, and in the case of the USSR, of his seemingly beloved church. Officials said that HANSSEN was a spy who profited from his activities, collecting more than $600,000 in cash, $50,000 in diamonds, and the promise, which he never took seriously, of another $800,000 in a Russian bank account. But in these court docs, the government says that he also planned on retiring from the FBI and relocating to Moscow, Russia, to teach college courses and train future spies. His boyhood hero, he told his Russian keepers, was the British intellectual turned Soviet mole, Kim Philby. In the Cold War of the 50s, Philby did exactly that. He escaped to Moscow. HANSSEN wrote to a Russian contact, "Want me to lecture in your 101 course in my old age? I would be a novelty attraction. I decided on this course when I was 14. I read Philby's book." That echoed the thought HANSSEN expressed in November of 1985 after first approaching KGB agents in Washington and volunteering to supply information. He would work, HANSSEN wrote, the KGB for money, a few diamonds for his children, and goodwill, so that when the time comes, you will accept my senior services as a guest lecturer. And the FBI found this note, allegedly. Eventually, I would appreciate an escape plan. And then he put in parentheses, nothing lasts forever. So like I said, he was born in April of 1944 in Chicago, the son of a policeman who rose to the rank of lieutenant. He was educated at Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois, and he studied dentistry and accounting. Now, make this make sense. He studied dentistry and accounting before landing a job at the FBI. His late start was he was nearly 32 when the Bureau swore him in, meant he was more mature than many recruits. But the age difference left him with disdain for many he would serve with. Bureaucratic types who he once told the Russians went, quote, all wet when faced with a decision they had to make by themselves. In October of 85, HANSSEN made that decision to sell Russian intelligence the names of 3 American-based KGB agents who were secretly working for the FBI. So in 85, this dude said there's 3 American-based KGB agents working for your FBI. HANSSEN came by the information when working at the FBI headquarters in Washington, but he waited until being transferred to New York City before approaching the Russians. The 3 KGB agents who had previously been betrayed by the rogue CIA agent Aldrich Ames were called to Moscow, where 2 were executed and the 3rd was given a prison sentence. This dude was responsible for these dudes being executed. In 87, he and the family returned to Vienna, Virginia, in the Washington suburbs, and have lived there since. By all appearances, their lives were solid and remarkable. Those who knew the HANSSENs described them as a close family. They attended Mass weekly. 4 of the children attended Our Lady of Good Counsel Catholic School, which now covers kindergarten through 8th grade in Vienna. Only 2 of the children remain at home, a comfortable brown frame house with a basketball hoop on the side. And Bernadette Bonnie HANSSEN was raised in Park Ridge, Illinois, his wife, in a family of 8. Her father was a professor at the Loyola University in Chicago, where Bonnie earned a bachelor's degree in sociology. She was teaching nearly full-time at Oak Crest School in McLean, Virginia, a small Catholic girls' school. Robert and Bonnie met while they were both working in Chicago. And she was in shock after his arrest. She said she had no notion that her husband was even under suspicion of spying. The HANSSEN's son, Mark, is a politics major at the University of Dallas in Irving, Texas. And their son, John, attends law school at the University of Notre Dame. One of their daughters is married and has at least 1 child, said Nancy Cullen, a neighbor of HANSSEN. Bonnie was described as a devoted and skillful mother who even recorded a commercial tape about activities a family can do together. RB Media is the company that sells Bonnie HANSSEN's tape, and she said, they're a wonderful family. They've been so concerned about raising their children well. And then she said, the more I think about it, the more I think he's being framed. 2 of Bonnie's sisters live nearby with their husbands and children. So his family was interviewed, and his father-in-law said that his son-in-law was obsessive about security, and that he had contempt for his colleagues. He had contempt for his colleagues, even some fellow spies. In one letter he wrote to the Russians, he called another spy a schnook. He had advice for his Russian buddies. Study the methods of the late Mayor Richard J. Daley, the boss of Chicago, to learn how to run a government. And technical tips, too. Though he used a Palm 3 organizer, he told the Russians in March 2000, the 4 version comes with a built-in wireless internet capability. It could be quite effective in spying. He could be humorous, overconfident. He warned the Russians He warned the Russians can lead cocksure officers to step in an occasional cow pie. Message to the translator, HANSSEN wrote in November of 2000. Got a good word for cow pie? And salty. In December of 91, when a promotion and a new job temporarily sidetracked his spying, he quoted Patton to show the Russians that he was anxious to keep working for them. He said, and I quote, as General Patton said, let's get this over with so we can go kick the shit out of the blank Japanese. Occasionally, HANSSEN enjoyed chatting spy to spy with his Russian handlers. That $800,000 set aside for him in the Most Bank in Moscow, he understood that it was only an accounting notation that may or may not be paid at some uncertain future. No hard feelings, he said. We do the same. Some of his former colleagues were saddened but not shocked that he may have led a secret life. They said he was kind of a loner, introverted, and he didn't laugh easily. They could never figure out how he hung on as a headquarters supervisor. Crazy. Crazy, crazy. All right, so now I'm going to show you this article from the Daily Mail. You know, the Daily Mail never disappoints. They have this ex-stripper that apparently had some kind of a relationship with this dude. And she says that, and wait till you see her. She says that she was being groomed to spy, that he was trying to groom her to also be a Russian spy. Now, let me make this bigger so you can see this honey. All right. This is the funniest thing here. Okay, so Robert HANSSEN groomed me to spy for the Russians. Ex-stripper reveals the late FBI agent turned traitor lavished her with cash, a Mercedes, and a luxury trip to Hong Kong in a bid to recruit her to work with him in decades-long betrayal. So here is Patricia Galley. Oh, wait, here's Robert first. We'll go through the gallery of photos. Daily Mail has the best photos. They do. They always get the best photos, too. Okay. That's Robert, his arrest picture. And here is our stripper. She says, there was no real indication of his secret life. If I had known, I would have got away from him, and fast. And she is talking from a friend's apartment in her native of Ohio. This is her. We'll keep going down. So here she is with Barbara Walters back in 2001. She did an interview. Here she is in the early 2000s. She says that she began her relationship after he saw her strip one night in summer of 1990 at Joanna's 1819 Club in Washington, D.C. And here she is, nah. Hey, Myrtle Beach Cop Watch, how you doing? So this is the woman that she said that he tried to get her to be a Russian spy with him. A stripper that he allegedly had a long relationship with. And then she says that Robert had been watching one of her shows. It was the Virgin set, her all in white. Oh, man. Here is Robert, his poor kids, though. I mean, for real. So here he is with his wife, Bonnie, and their 6 children. He stopped spying for a few years when he was confronted by his wife. But then she said she didn't know. But I found conflicting stories of that. So I don't know where this man's kids are, but I hope they're all doing well. It sounds like they all went on to lead productive lives. Here is his business card and his badge. Those are pretty fancy there, FBI. Like, those really don't look like they could ever be duplicated by anyone. Joanna's was the pole spot. Hey, Ann Johns. FBI agents arresting HANSSEN near his Virginia home in February of 2001. Oh, FBI agent and former FBI agent and mole. Let's watch the video. This is from 2001, guys. We're going in.
My doctor showed me that Neurostar was.
We're going into the archives. Okay, wait. Let's watch this again. Look, they're filming him and he just walks up like he doesn't. What the? Eye on their coats? Did he think they were there to say hi? I'm so confused. Let's watch that again. Let's watch that ambush. This is badass right here. Watch. You guys, this is your F. Oh my God. You can't make this stuff up. You just cannot. I need to see that one more time. Just because I'm an immature fool. He puts his hand in his pocket too. Wait. They weren't even worried. Look. They weren't even worried that he had his hand in his pocket. Like, he could have pulled out a gun and started shooting. Watch. They weren't even concerned. And then all of a sudden, he's just standing. Like, we go from him with his hand in his pocket, and then there's something cut out. Watch. FBI agents in front of HANSSEN's home. So was that even his house? I don't even think that's his house. No, because he has that house has X's on the windows. Whose house is that even? So this is his pad. He lived very modest. It says he received $1.4 million in cash from the KGB. Oh, here it is. In February 2001, HANSSEN was followed by FBI agents to a wooded Virginia park and arrested after taping a bag of classified documents to the underside of a footbridge. So, okay, I remember now. He was going to drop off some documents for his Russian friends at this park. And he taped them underneath this bridge. And they followed him, I guess, and watched him do it.
What?
I don't know.
Objection!
I don't know. I don't know.
It isn't that long ago, but doesn't it look ancient? It's so weird. And then here he is. Oh, man. He is Robert HANSSEN, 79, was found dead in his federal prison cell in Florence, Colorado on Monday, which was last Monday, where he had languished for 20 years. He got 15 consecutive life sentences for what he did. 15 life sentences. But we let that arms guy go. Victor Boot. We let Victor Boot go. But we gave this guy 20 life sentences.
Yeah.
Well, 50-ish there. Whoops. He's 50-ish there, but when he died, he was 79. So that's our gallery. But this is the stripper. Look at, she says, look at, this is their source. Everything that we did together now feels like he was testing me in some way. I feel like it was all part of a bigger plan. And then she goes on to say, We had a purely platonic relationship. So what was in it for him? It had to be that he was grooming me for spying. What else? Gally, who has battled crack cocaine addiction and destitution in recent years, continued. He would ask me crazy things like, do you think it would be exciting to be a spy? I asked him in Hong Kong over dinner one night, haven't you ever done anything wrong? Incredibly, he said, I changed some test scores once. That's all he told me. He was a big part of my life. He was a lot of things. He made nearly 2 years very, very intensely special. I mean, who does that for you? The U.S. government called it probably the worst intelligence disaster in U.S. history. The father of 6 also blew the cover of 9 double agents in Moscow, resulting in 2 of them being executed. He also compromised dozens of intelligence programs. Listen to this, guys. This is your bombshell for the night, including a secret tunnel beneath the Russian embassy in Washington to spy. What? I didn't even know we had a Russian embassy in Washington. And number 2, there's a secret tunnel beneath the motherfucker. What? And then she goes on to say, I had no communication with him while he was in prison, but I wanted to. Oh, God, I wanted to. And I did want to visit him, but I told myself that's not possible. And as the years went on, well, things changed. He wouldn't even let me hug him, even when he bought me something and I wanted to thank him. Once I went to embrace him and he said, no, no, no. It kind of freaked me out because, believe me, I'd never had that reaction before. I'm sure you haven't. Yeah, hell of 2 stories, right? Well, I hope you guys, feel like you learned something and walked away from this live stream learning something that you didn't know before. So there's 2 men that have passed away that are a part of our history. And I think it's important to know their stories. So let me go to your questions and see if you guys had any or comments. I find it interesting, and I'm glad. I mean, the ones that are here that are interested in this kind of stuff, I appreciate you. And Ann Johns, I've got one question. She said, I've missed you, and I have missed you too, hon. I am glad to see you tonight. Loaded Hot says they had to rework the entire system because of him. Yeah, I mean, we didn't even hug. Come on now. Come on now. But if you are a Patreon member, you will be able to see all these documents. I'll throw them in there. You won't have to do any searching on your own. I will provide them for you. And I'm going to conclude this. And we'll do some coffee tomorrow morning. We're going to do a coffee stream tomorrow. We're going to be talking Idaho 4 and Brian Koberger and this hearing. And I am on this channel for now, Jay. I don't know what I'm doing, but yes, this is my OG channel. And yes, I want to get over 100,000 subscribers. So if you could please subscribe if you are not subscribed. My goal is 100K. Then I can get someone at YouTube and I can talk to. So that is where I'm at.
She said, we came home, we planted flowers.
And if you would like to donate to the stream, you can do so at www.j4j411.live. And that's it. No ads here, and we have Patreon, and that is that. And hopefully we can sustain until we get everything figured out. I appreciate your support. You guys are the best. Thank you, mods, for being here. Thank you, Robin. It's still a little bit like throbbing a little bit, but it's something, and I've been sneezing all day too. So I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. I enjoy bringing this stuff to you, and look for Given the Fallout to be coming out at the end of this month.
Given the Fallout.
The Patreon members will get the episode.
Given the Fallout.
The first episode first. So, we got to go out with some flute action.
For donuts.
We're going to have coffee and donuts in the morning. I will see you guys in the AM. If you can make it, I would appreciate it. I'll see you then. Peace out.
you and your problems, I don't give a damn. You talk way too much, I have heard enough. About you and your problems, I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn, damn, 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 damn. Yikes. You wanna be with me.
Like, what the fuck is this? And everybody's like, what the fuck is this?
Okay!
Eddie, what have you done for me lately?
Oh my God. God forbid, one comment.
Is it one Jennifer or two Jennifers?
Bye, Jennifer.